I'm Captain Elena Marquez, 32 years old, an Air Force officer and single mom. For years, I bent over backwards for my younger sister Sophia, covering her rent, bailing her out of mistakes, trusting her with my son during deployments. But when I logged into the nanny cam overseas and saw her quietly packing Daniel's suitcase with one-way tickets on top, I realized she wasn't babysitting, she was planning to take him. That night, I made a choice that changed everything. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted most? If so, share your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before I get into what happened, let me know where you're tuning in from. And if you've ever had to set boundaries with family the hard way, hit like and subscribe for more true stories about protecting yourself and the people you love. What happened next might surprise you. I deployed to Qatar in February, leaving Daniel with Sophia for what was supposed to be a 6-month assignment. My sister had volunteered eagerly, moving into my house in San Antonio the week before I left. She'd been between jobs again, another pattern I'd grown used to over the years, and caring for my 6-year-old son seemed to solve both our problems. Sophia and I had always been different. Growing up in our father's military household, I learned early that responsibility meant survival. Our mother worked double shifts at the hospital while Dad was stationed overseas, leaving me to make sure Sophia did her homework, ate dinner, got to school on time. Even at 12, I was already practicing for motherhood in ways I didn't understand then. Sophia was 3 years younger, but light years away from my serious nature. She had our mother's laugh and our grandmother's ability to charm her way out of trouble. While I studied for honor roll, she convinced teachers to extend deadlines. While I saved my allowance, she spent hers on friendship bracelets and nail polish, always knowing I'd share my lunch money when hers ran out. The pattern followed us into adulthood. Sophia would call at midnight, crying about rent she couldn't make, car payments she'd forgotten, boyfriends who'd turned out to be married. I'd wire the money, drive across town to pick her up from bars, co-sign leases I knew she'd break. It wasn't resentment exactly, more like resigned duty. She was my sister. This was what family did. When Daniel was born, Sophia transformed into the fun and overnight. She showed up with oversized stuffed animals, taught him Spanish songs our grandmother had sung to us, took selfies with him that made my serious little boy giggle. During my earlier deployments, she'd babysit for weekends, filling my house with the sound of cartoons and her infectious energy. He needs fun in his life. She'd tell me when I'd come home to find them building blanket forts instead of doing the reading homework I'd left. You can't schedule everything, Elena. Maybe she was right. My military training made me approach motherhood like a mission, structured, planned, with contingencies for every scenario. Sophia brought chaos, but also joy. Daniel lit up when she walked into a room in ways he never did for me. The offer to care for Daniel during my Qatar deployment came during Christmas dinner. Sophia had been living with a roommate who was moving out, leaving her scrambling for housing again. I mentioned needing childcare arrangements, and she volunteered immediately. I could move in, take care of everything. It would help us both. My mother nodded approvingly from across the table. Sophia's wonderful with Daniel. And she needs stability. I wanted to say that stability wasn't something Sophia provided, but rather something she consumed from others. Instead, I smiled and said we'd discuss it. That night, after Daniel was asleep, Sophia found me cleaning dishes in the kitchen. She leaned against the counter, still wearing the red sweater that made her look younger than her 28 years. "I know what you're thinking," she said. "About my track record. I kept scrubbing the same plate. What am I thinking? That I'm irresponsible. That I'll mess this up somehow." I set the plate in the drainer, choosing my words carefully. "You've had some challenges with commitment. This is different. This is Daniel." She moved closer, and I caught the scent of her perfume, something floral and expensive she couldn't afford. "Elena, I love that kid like he's my own. You know that." The phrase stuck with me later, though I couldn't identify why. Of course she loved Daniel. We all did. But there was something in the way she'd said it, a possessiveness that felt too intense. Over the next month, we worked out the logistics. Sophia would move in 2 weeks before my deployment, giving us time to establish routines. I created detailed schedules, Daniel's school pickup times, his soccer practice schedule, bedtime routine, emergency contacts. I showed her how to use the nanny cam system I'd installed for previous deployments, though she rolled her eyes at what she called my surveillance state. "You act like I'm going to lose him at the grocery store," she laughed, but something in her expression suggested she found my precautions insulting rather than funny. The week before I left, Sophia moved her belongings into my guest room. It wasn't much: 2 suitcases of clothes, a jewelry box, some books she never read. She'd always lived light, ready to move when relationships ended or roommates changed their minds. I envied that freedom sometimes, the ability to pack a life into a few bags. Daniel adapted to her presence immediately. She made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs for breakfast, turned bath time into elaborate games with toy boats, read bedtime stories with different voices for each character. Watching them together, I felt a familiar pang of inadequacy. When I read to Daniel, I stuck to the words on the page. Sophia made everything an adventure. The night before my deployment, I tucked Daniel into bed myself, wanting one last moment of our routine. He wrapped his small arms around my neck, smelling like his strawberry shampoo and the lavender lotion we used to prevent dry skin. "Will you come back soon, Mama?" "6 months, I promised." "That's not so long. Aunt Sophia says she'll take good care of me." "I know she will." But as I kissed his forehead, I felt an unexpected reluctance to let him go. Not just the normal deployment anxiety, but something sharper. A sense that I was leaving something precious in hands that might not hold it as carefully as I would. Sophia appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the hall light. "He'll be fine, Elena." "We both will." I nodded, but didn't move from beside his bed. Daniel's breathing had already settled into the rhythm of approaching sleep, his face peaceful in the glow of his nightlight. "You don't have to worry about everything," Sophia added softly. "Sometimes the best thing you can do is trust someone else to handle things." I stood finally, kissing Daniel once more before following her into the hallway. She was right, of course. I'd built a career on trusting my team, delegating critical missions to people whose judgment I respected. But those people had earned that trust through proven competence, not family obligation. As I packed my final items that night, I found myself double-checking the nanny cam connections, making sure Sophia understood how to reach me at any hour, reviewing my emergency leave procedures with more attention than usual. The precautions felt necessary, though I couldn't articulate why. When the taxi arrived at 5 a.m. to take me to the airport, Sophia was still in her pajamas, hair tousled from sleep. She hugged me at the front door, and I smelled coffee on her breath mixed with that expensive perfume. "Take care of him," I said. "Like he's my own," she replied, and again something about the phrase unsettled me. But then Daniel appeared, rubbing his eyes and reaching for one last hug, and I focused on memorizing the weight of him in my arms, the way his hair stuck up in the back, the sleepy warmth of his small body against mine. At 32,000 feet somewhere over the Atlantic, I finally let myself cry for the first time since Daniel was born. Not from sadness exactly, but from the overwhelming responsibility of loving someone so completely while being unable to protect them from everything, including, as it would turn out, the people we're supposed to trust most. The first month went smoothly. Sophia sent photos every few days: Daniel at the playground, grinning gap-toothed at the camera, Daniel at the kitchen table, concentrating on homework, Daniel in his soccer uniform, grass stains on his knees and pride on his face. The images filled my phone's memory and my heart with equal measures of gratitude and longing. Our video calls followed a comfortable pattern. Daniel would update me on school projects and playground politics, while Sophia made dinner in the background, occasionally calling out comments or questions. She seemed more settled than I'd ever seen her, maybe because she finally had real responsibility instead of the borrowed kind that came with other people's crises. "He's doing great in math," she reported during one call. "His teacher says he's reading above grade level 2. Daniel beamed at the praise, showing me his latest artwork through the screen. A crayon drawing of our family, 3 stick figures standing in front of a house. Me in military uniform, him in the middle, Sophia with yellow hair and a big smile. "Where are you in this picture, buddy?" I asked. "That's home," he said simply. "You're visiting." The comment stung more than I expected. In his 6-year-old logic, I'd become the visitor to my own life. Sophia caught my expression and quickly changed the subject, but the damage was done. It was around week 6 that I noticed subtle changes. Sophia's texts became less frequent, her responses shorter. When I called, she seemed distracted, rushing through conversations about Daniel's day. She started letting calls go to voicemail, claiming later that she'd been busy with Daniel's activities or household tasks. "You worry too much," she said when I mentioned feeling out of the loop. "He's fine. We're both fine." But fine wasn't the same as connected, and connection was what I needed to function 7,000 miles away from my son. I'd built my peace of mind on regular communication, detailed updates, the sense that I remained an active presence in Daniel's daily life even when I couldn't physically be there. During one video call, I overheard Sophia talking to someone in the background. A neighbor maybe, someone I couldn't see on camera. "He's basically mine now," she said, laughing. "Elena's gone so much, I'm more like his mom than his aunt." The words hit me like cold water. Daniel was still showing me his new Lego creation, oblivious to what I'd just heard, but I felt something shift inside me. A protective instinct that had been dormant suddenly came awake. "Sophia," I called, interrupting her conversation. "Can you come here for a minute?" She appeared on camera, smiling brightly. "What's up?" "I missed what you were saying." "Something about Daniel." "Oh, just telling Mrs. Chen how well we're doing. You know, the adjustment and everything." But that wasn't what she'd said, and we both knew it. I filed the moment away, telling myself I was overreacting to innocent phrasing. She was caring for my son full-time. Of course it felt like motherhood to her. Still, I found myself checking the nanny cam more frequently over the next few weeks. The camera was positioned to show Daniel's bedroom and part of the hallway, providing a window into their nighttime routine. Usually I saw nothing unusual. Sophia reading bedtime stories, Daniel brushing his teeth, the ordinary domestic moments that made up a child's evening. But I began to notice small changes in their dynamic. Sophia lingered longer at bedtime, sitting on Daniel's bed after he'd fallen asleep. She rearranged his room, moving furniture and decorations without asking me first. His walls, once covered with photos of our military family and his artwork, now featured new pictures, Sophia and Daniel at parks I didn't recognize, restaurants I'd never taken him to. Activities that seemed to have no connection to the life we'd built together. When I mentioned the changes during our next call, Sophia's response was defensive. He wanted to redecorate. Kids need change sometimes. But those photos of us, they're in his closet. Safe. Safe from what, I wondered, but didn't ask. Daniel seemed happy enough, chattering about school and soccer and the new ice cream place Sophia had discovered. If he missed the familiar decorations, he didn't mention it. It was during week 10 that Sophia first mentioned wanting a fresh start. The comment came at the end of a brief phone call, almost as an afterthought. "I've been thinking about maybe moving somewhere new after you get back. You know, starting over." "Moving where?" "I don't know yet. Maybe Colorado. Or somewhere warm, like Arizona. I just feel like I need a change of scenery." The conversation ended before I could ask more questions, but her words stayed with me through my night shift. Sophia had always been impulsive about relocations, but something about this felt different. More secretive, less spontaneous. Over the following weeks, she mentioned the potential move more frequently, but always vaguely. She researched different cities online, she said. She'd been looking at job opportunities in various states. She even mentioned checking out apartment listings, just to see what's out there. What bothered me wasn't the idea of Sophia moving. She was an adult, free to live wherever she chose. What bothered me was the timing, and the way she discussed these plans as if Daniel and I were factors to be worked around rather than people whose lives would be affected by her decisions. During one of our video calls, I asked directly, "When you talk about moving, what happens with Daniel?" "I'll need time to find new childcare arrangements." Sophia's smile faltered for just a moment. "Oh, we'll figure something out. There's still time." "But time for what?" My deployment had a clear end date. Our arrangement had been temporary from the beginning. Yet Sophia spoke about her potential move as if it were inevitable, while treating my return as negotiable. I started calling more frequently, trying to maintain connection not just with Daniel, but with the rhythms of their shared daily life. Sophia's patience with these calls grew thinner. She'd hurry Daniel through conversations, citing bedtimes or bath times or homework that couldn't wait. "You're checking up on us," she accused during one call when I asked to see Daniel's math homework through the camera. "I'm staying involved in my son's life. From 7,000 miles away. Sometimes you just have to let go, Elena." But letting go wasn't an option for me. Daniel was my son, my responsibility, my heart walking around outside my chest. Distance didn't diminish that connection, it intensified it, making every missed call feel like lost time, every shortened conversation feel like abandonment. The breaking point came during week 12, when Sophia stopped answering my calls altogether for 3 days straight. My messages went unanswered. My emails received no response. For 72 hours, I had no contact with my son. When she finally called back, her explanation was casual to the point of insult. "Sorry, we've been super busy. Daniel had a school thing, and then we went to San Marcos for the weekend. I guess I forgot to charge my phone." But I could see the read receipts on my messages. I knew she'd been receiving my calls. The silence hadn't been accidental, it had been deliberate. That night, I logged into the nanny cam with more than routine interest. I needed to see Daniel, to reassure myself that he was safe and cared for. What I found instead was the beginning of my worst nightmare. It was 2 a.m. my time, 8 p.m. in San Antonio. I'd logged into the nanny cam expecting to catch the tail end of Daniel's bedtime routine, maybe see Sophia reading him a story before lights out. Instead, I found her sitting on his bed in the dark, speaking in whispers I could barely make out through the camera's audio. Daniel was already asleep, his small form buried under the superhero comforter I'd bought him before leaving. Sophia sat beside him, one hand stroking his hair in a gesture that looked maternal, but felt wrong somehow. Too possessive, too intimate for an aunt saying goodnight. I adjusted the volume on my laptop, straining to hear her words. "Everything's going to be different soon, sweetheart," she whispered. "Better. We won't have to worry about schedules and rules and all those things that make life so complicated." My chest tightened. Daniel stirred slightly in his sleep, and Sophia's hand moved to his shoulder, steadying him. "Don't worry about it now. Just sleep. Tomorrow we'll start planning our adventure." Adventure. The word sent ice through my veins. This wasn't aunt talk. This wasn't the language of temporary caregiving or weekend fun. This was something else entirely. Sophia stood, smoothing Daniel's blanket with the practiced motion of someone who'd done this many times. But instead of leaving his room, she moved toward his closet. I watched through the camera as she opened the door and began removing clothes from hangers, folding them carefully and placing them in a pile on his desk chair. My heart hammered against my ribs. Why was she packing Daniel's clothes at bedtime? Where were they going that required this level of preparation? She worked quietly, efficiently, selecting his favorite shirts, his best jeans, his warmest jacket. Not the random assortment someone might pack for a weekend trip, but a deliberate collection of essentials. The kind of packing someone did when they weren't planning to come back. I grabbed my phone, calling Sophia immediately. The rings echoed through my earpiece while I watched her freeze on camera, looking toward Daniel's bedroom door. She didn't answer. After 4 rings, the call went to voicemail. I hung up and called again. This time, I watched her pull her phone from her pocket, look at the screen, and deliberately decline the call. The betrayal was complete and undeniable. She wasn't just ignoring my calls, she was actively hiding from me while making plans that involved my son. I called a 3rd time and a 4th. Each time, Sophia looked at her phone and sent me to voicemail. Meanwhile, she continued packing Daniel's belongings with the calm efficiency of someone who'd been planning this for weeks. My hands shook as I navigated to my contacts, looking for anyone in San Antonio who could help me. Carla Ramirez, my next-door neighbor, had a spare key to my house. She'd watered my plants during previous deployments, collected my mail, been the kind of neighbor who made military life possible for single parents. It was nearly 9 p.m. in Texas, but I called anyway. "Elena," Carla's voice was surprised but warm. How are you, honey? How's the deployment going? Carla, I need your help. Something's wrong with Sophia. I explained what I'd seen through the camera, the strange behavior, the ignored calls. As I spoke, I kept watching the feed, seeing Sophia move from the closet to Daniel's dresser, continuing her methodical packing. That doesn't sound right, Carla agreed. Want me to go over there? Check on things. Would you? I don't want to overreact, but you're not overreacting. A mother's instincts are usually right. While we spoke, Sophia returned to Daniel's bedside. She leaned down, kissed his forehead, and whispered something I couldn't quite hear through the camera's audio. But her body language spoke volumes. This was goodbye, not goodnight. Carla, can you go now? I'm watching them through the camera, and I think she might be planning to leave tonight. I'm already getting my keys. I stayed on the phone with Carla as she walked across our adjoining driveways. Through the camera, I watched Sophia finish packing Daniel's clothes and move toward his bookshelf, selecting his favorite stories, his special stuffed elephant, the photo of us at last year's Christmas parade. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't a vacation or a spontaneous weekend trip. Sophia was packing the essential pieces of Daniel's childhood, the items that would help him feel at home wherever she planned to take him. The doorbell's chime echoed through the camera's audio. Sophia froze, then quickly shoved Daniel's clothes back into the closet. She smoothed her hair, checked her reflection in Daniel's mirror, and walked toward the front door with the casual stride of someone who had nothing to hide. I couldn't see the front door through the bedroom camera, but I could hear voices. Carla's concerned tone, Sophia's bright, artificial cheerfulness. Oh, hi, Carla. Is everything okay? I was just checking on you and Daniel. Elena called, said she hadn't heard from you in a while. We're fine. Just busy, you know how it is. Daniel's sleeping. Mind if I take a quick peek? Elena's worried. There was a pause, and I imagined Sophia calculating her options. Refusing would look suspicious, but allowing Carla inside meant exposing whatever other preparations she'd made. Of course. Come on in. Though I should warn you, I've been doing some organizing. The place is a bit of a mess. Through the camera, I watched Sophia return to Daniel's room with Carla behind her. My neighbor's expression was skeptical as she took in the scene, Daniel's partially opened closet, the suspicious pile of folded clothes on his chair, the systematic emptiness where his favorite belongings used to sit. You doing some spring cleaning? Carla asked. Something like that. Daniel's outgrown so much stuff. I thought I'd sort through everything while Elena's away. But Carla wasn't buying it. She moved closer to the closet, noting the specific items Sophia had selected for packing, not outgrown clothes, but current favorites in perfect condition. These look like they still fit him fine. Sophia's laugh was too bright, too forced. Kids grow so fast, you know? Better to get ahead of it. Carla picked up the stuffed elephant from Daniel's bed, the one Sophia had removed from the bookshelf. Elena told me this was his security animal. Doesn't seem like something he'd outgrow. The silence stretched between them, filled with implications neither woman wanted to voice directly. Finally, Carla spoke again, her voice gentler but firm. Sophia, honey, what's really going on here? I held my breath, watching through the camera as my sister's carefully constructed facade finally cracked. Her shoulders sagged, and for the first time since I'd started watching, she looked like the scared, overwhelmed person she really was. I can't do this anymore, Carla. I thought I could, but it's too hard. What's too hard? Being responsible for him. Always having to answer to Elena, always having to follow her rules, her schedules. I love Daniel, but I need my own life. Carla nodded sympathetically, but her eyes remained alert. So you're thinking of moving out? Elena mentioned you'd been talking about a fresh start. Sophia looked down at her hands, then back up at Carla with an expression I recognized from our childhood. It was the same look she'd worn when caught in lies about homework or broken rules, a mixture of defiance and desperation. I was thinking Daniel might come with me. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Through the camera, I watched Carla's face shift from concern to alarm as the full scope of Sophia's plan became clear. Come with you where? Carla's voice remained steady, but I could see her body tense. Sophia moved closer to Daniel's bed, her hand reaching automatically toward his sleeping form. Somewhere we could start fresh. Without all the military restrictions and deployments, and she gestured vaguely around the room. All of this structure. Sophia, you're talking about taking Elena's son away from her. I'm talking about giving him a normal childhood. Sophia's voice rose slightly, then dropped again as Daniel stirred. Elena's never here. When she is, it's all schedules and homework checks and bedtime routines. Daniel needs fun. He needs someone who can actually be present. I was already reaching for my phone to call my commanding officer. This conversation was evidence of kidnapping intent, and I needed official intervention before Sophia could act on her plans. Elena loves that boy more than anything, Carla said firmly. You know that. Love isn't enough if you're never around to show it. She's serving her country. Protecting people like you and Daniel. Sophia laughed bitterly. Protecting strangers while her son grows up with babysitters and daycare, and she stopped, perhaps realizing how her words sounded. And loving aunts who volunteer to help, Carla finished pointedly. Through the camera, I could see Sophia's internal struggle. Part of her seemed to recognize the selfishness of her plan, but another part was already too invested in the fantasy of escape to back down. He calls me Mama sometimes, Sophia said quietly. When he's hurt or scared or happy about something. It just comes naturally to him. Because you're taking care of him temporarily. That doesn't make you his mother. Doesn't it? I'm the one who's been here every day. I know his favorite songs, his bedtime fears, what makes him laugh. Elena knows his schedule, but I know his heart. I was on hold with the military family liaison office, but listening to Sophia's words felt like being gutted. There was truth in what she said, painful truth about the sacrifices my career required. But she was twisting that truth into justification for theft. Where were you planning to go? Carla asked. I found a job opportunity in Colorado. Denver. They need administrative assistants, and the pay is decent. There are good schools, and Daniel loves mountains. When? Sophia glanced toward the window, as if calculating timing. Soon. This weekend, maybe. Before Elena starts planning her return. My call was finally answered by Mrs. Alvarez, the family liaison officer who'd helped me navigate childcare arrangements before my deployment. I quickly explained the situation, describing what I'd witnessed through the camera and overheard through Carla's phone. Captain Marquez, this sounds like attempted custodial interference, Mrs. Alvarez said. Have you contacted local law enforcement? Not yet. My neighbor is with them now, trying to contact them immediately. Document everything you've observed. I'll start the emergency leave process on this end. While I made notes for my police report, I kept watching the camera feed. Sophia and Carla were still talking, but their conversation had shifted. Sophia was no longer defending her plan. She was explaining it, as if Carla might somehow understand or even support her decision. Daniel's happy with me, Sophia said. Happier than he's been since Elena left. He doesn't ask about her as much anymore. He's adjusting to having me as his primary person. That's called attachment, Carla replied. It's normal when a caregiver is consistent. But it's not the same as replacing his mother. What if it could be, though? What if Elena came back and found out we were settled somewhere else, happy, building a real life together? She might realize that this arrangement works better for everyone. The delusion in Sophia's voice was complete. She'd convinced herself that kidnapping my son would somehow be a favor to all of us, that geographical distance and time would transform theft into liberation. Sophia, you're not thinking clearly. Elena would be destroyed. And Daniel would be confused and scared. Kids adapt. They're more resilient than adults. Not to being taken away from their mothers. Through the camera, I watched Sophia's face harden. The vulnerable, explanatory mask fell away, revealing something colder underneath. Elena made her choice when she decided the military was more important than being present for her son. I'm just making a different choice. It was then that I understood. This wasn't impulse or temporary overwhelm. Sophia had been planning this betrayal for weeks, maybe months. She'd positioned herself as the solution to my deployment needs specifically to create this opportunity. The San Antonio police dispatcher took my information with professional efficiency. attempted kidnapping, potential custodial interference, evidence of planning and intent. They would send officers to my address immediately. Ma'am, is there someone on scene who can maintain visual contact until officers arrive? My neighbor. She's there now, talking to the suspect. Good. Advise her not to leave the premises and not to let the suspect leave with the child. I called Carla back, keeping her on speaker while I continued monitoring the camera. She answered quietly, stepping away from Sophia and Daniel. Police are coming, I told her. Can you stay until they get there? Of course. Elena, I'm so sorry. I should have noticed something was wrong earlier. This isn't your fault. Is Daniel still sleeping? Yes, thank God. Hopefully we can resolve this without waking him. Through the camera, I could see Sophia pacing Daniel's room, her earlier calm completely gone. She kept looking between the window and the door, as if calculating escape routes. But with Carla present and police en route, her options were disappearing. The sound of sirens was faint through the camera's audio, but growing closer. Sophia froze at the noise, then rushed to Daniel's bedside. Daniel, sweetie, wake up. We need to go now. She was shaking him gently, trying to wake him without startling him. My son's confused face appeared on camera as he struggled toward consciousness. Aunt Sophia? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, baby. We just need to take a little trip earlier than planned. Carla moved quickly, positioning herself between Sophia and the bedroom door. Sophia, don't do this. The police are here. Mama? Where's Mama? Daniel was fully awake now, sensing the tension in the room even if he couldn't understand it. The word hit Sophia like a physical blow. He wasn't calling for her, he was calling for me. Despite weeks of her care, months of her presence, he still knew who his real mother was. The doorbell rang, followed immediately by authoritative knocking. San Antonio Police Department. We need to speak with everyone in the house. Sophia's shoulders sagged in defeat. The fantasy was over, the plan exposed, the consequences unavoidable. She looked down at Daniel's frightened face and seemed to finally understand what she'd been prepared to do. It's okay, sweetie, she whispered, but I wasn't sure if she was talking to him or herself. Everything's going to be okay. Through the camera, I watched my sister surrender the dream that had consumed her judgment, while 7,000 miles away, I prepared to come home to pick up the pieces of the life she'd tried to steal. Within 6 hours, I was on a military transport plane heading home. The emergency leave had been approved immediately once my commanding officer understood the situation. Mrs. Alvarez had coordinated with the Air Force Family Support Network to ensure Daniel would be cared for during the transition, but I needed to be there myself. The police report was straightforward but devastating. Sophia had purchased one-way tickets to Denver for herself and Daniel, scheduled for the following morning. She'd researched elementary schools in Colorado, looked at apartments, even contacted a potential employer about starting work the following week. This wasn't a spontaneous breakdown, it was a premeditated plan to disappear with my son. When officers searched her room, they found a detailed timeline of her preparations. She'd been researching how to enroll Daniel in school under her name as his guardian. She'd looked into legal procedures for changing a child's residency across state lines. Most chillingly, she'd researched how long it typically took for military personnel to obtain emergency leave for family crises. Sophia was arrested for attempted custodial interference, though she was released on bond pending trial. The conditions of her release included no contact with Daniel and immediate departure from my home. By the time I landed in San Antonio, she was already gone. Daniel was staying with Carla and her family, sleeping in their guest room surrounded by toys and comfort foods, but asking constantly when I was coming home. When I finally walked through Carla's front door 36 hours after seeing Sophia pack his clothes, he ran to me with the desperation of a child who'd been afraid I might never return. Mama, you came back. I held him against me, breathing in the familiar scent of his shampoo, feeling his solid weight in my arms, reassuring myself that he was safe and present and still mine. But even as relief flooded through me, I could see the confusion in his eyes. Where's Aunt Sophia? She said we were going on an adventure, but then the police came, and everyone was sad. How do you explain betrayal to a 6-year-old? How do you describe the difference between love and possession, between care and control? I settled for the simplest truth I could manage. Aunt Sophia made some choices that weren't good for our family. She had to go away for a while. Is she in trouble? Yes, buddy. She's in trouble. Are you in trouble too? Is that why you came home early? No, sweetheart. I came home early because I needed to be with you. Sometimes plans change when families need to be together. That night, I put Daniel to bed in his own room for the first time in 4 months. He wanted to sleep in my bed, reluctant to be separated even by the hallway between our rooms. I understood the feeling. I wasn't ready to let him out of my sight either. As I tucked him in, he looked around his room with curious detachment. Aunt Sophia moved my pictures, he said matter-of-factly. I noticed. Do you want me to put them back where they were? He nodded, then added, she said Mama was too far away to see them anyway. The casual cruelty of the comment took my breath away. Sophia hadn't just been planning to take Daniel physically, she'd been erasing me emotionally, systematically undermining his connection to me while I was unable to defend it. I can always see you, Daniel. Even when I'm far away, you're always in my heart, and in my thoughts, and in my prayers. Aunt Sophia said that was just something grown-ups say to make kids feel better. I knelt beside his bed, taking his small hands in mine. Daniel, look at me. When someone you love is far away, love doesn't disappear. It doesn't get smaller or weaker. Love stays the same no matter how many miles are between people. Then why did Aunt Sophia want us to go far away from you? The question was so direct, so innocent, and so impossible to answer without destroying a 6-year-old's faith in the adults who were supposed to protect him. I chose my words carefully. Sometimes grown-ups get confused about what's best. Aunt Sophia thought she was helping, but she was wrong. Is she still my aunt? The question I'd been dreading, because the answer was complicated in ways that went beyond family relationships and into legal definitions of trust and safety. She's still your father's sister, I said finally. But being someone's aunt means more than just being related. It means caring about what's best for that person, even when it's hard. Aunt Sophia forgot that part. Over the following days, I worked to reconstruct Daniel's sense of security and routine. We restored his room to its previous arrangement, hung the family photos back on his walls, re-established bedtime stories and morning rituals that had been disrupted during Sophia's residency. But some changes couldn't be undone so easily. Daniel had grown attached to Sophia's way of doing things. He missed her elaborate breakfast productions, her creative bedtime stories, her willingness to bend rules that I enforced strictly. In his mind, my return represented not just safety, but also the end of fun. Aunt Sophia let me stay up late on school nights, he said during our first week back together. I know, buddy. But sleep is important for growing bodies and learning brains. She said rules were just suggestions. Some rules are suggestions. But some rules are about keeping people safe and healthy. Which kind are your rules? The important kind, I said, but I could see in his eyes that he didn't understand the difference yet. To him, I was the parent who said no to ice cream for breakfast and yes to homework before television. Sophia had been the parent who said yes to everything. The hardest part wasn't managing Daniel's adjustment, it was managing my own guilt. Every time he mentioned something fun he'd done with Sophia, every time he asked why we couldn't go to the park at bedtime like Aunt Sophia used to do, I felt the weight of my absence during those crucial months. She'd been right about one thing, I had missed daily moments that couldn't be recovered or replicated. Dr. Patricia Reyes, the child psychologist Mrs. Alvarez had recommended, helped me understand that Daniel's attachment to Sophia was normal and healthy, even in light of her betrayal. Children don't have the context to recognize manipulation, Dr. Reyes explained during our first session. To Daniel, Sophia provided consistency and attention during a period when you weren't available. The fact that she was planning to kidnap him doesn't erase the genuine care he received day to day. But how do I help him understand that what she did was wrong without making him feel guilty for loving her? You don't make him choose between loving her and trusting you. You help him understand that people can make terrible choices even when they love someone. The sessions with Dr. Reyes became a regular part of our routine, helping Daniel process his confusion about Sophia's disappearance and helping me navigate the complex emotions of betrayal, guilt, and protective fury that threatened to overwhelm my judgment. 3 weeks after my return, Sophia called. I was expecting it. Her lawyer had been in contact about the criminal charges, and I knew she would eventually want to explain herself or apologize or attempt some form of reconciliation. What I wasn't expecting was the tone of wounded righteousness in her voice. Elena, we need to talk. This whole situation has gotten completely out of hand. I was folding Daniel's laundry while he played in the backyard, keeping him within sight through the kitchen window while maintaining the normal domestic routines that helped him feel secure. I don't think we have anything to discuss, Sophia. Of course we do. I'm your sister. Daniel is my nephew. We're family. The word family hit me like ice water. Family doesn't kidnap children, Sophia. I wasn't kidnapping him. I was giving him opportunities you can't provide. The justification was so breathtaking in its selfishness that I had to sit down. Opportunities to what? Never see his mother again. Opportunities to have a present parent instead of someone who treats motherhood like a part-time job. I closed my eyes, counting to 10 before responding. Dr. Reyes had warned me that Sophia might try to turn the conversation into an attack on my parenting or my military service, deflecting from her own actions by making me defensive about choices that had nothing to do with her betrayal. Sophia, you planned to steal my son. You bought plane tickets, researched schools, and were literally packing his belongings when the police arrived. Don't pretend this was about Daniel's welfare. It was about his welfare. He was thriving with me, Elena. He was happy, settled, bonding with someone who was actually there. He was bonding with someone who was lying to him about her intentions. I never lied to him. You told him you were planning an adventure. You didn't mention it was permanent or that it involved never seeing me again. There was a long pause, and I could hear Sophia breathing on the other end of the line. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, more like the sister I remembered from childhood. I didn't know how to tell him. I thought maybe once we were settled somewhere, once he saw how good life could be, he would understand. Understand what? That his mother abandoned him? That the woman who gave birth to him and raised him and loved him through every day of his life just didn't matter anymore. That's exactly what you meant, Sophia. You wanted him to forget me. I wanted him to not have to miss you anymore. The admission hung between us, and I realized this was the closest to honesty Sophia had come since her arrest. In her mind, she'd been solving the problem of Daniel's sadness about my deployment by removing me from the equation entirely. Missing someone you love isn't a problem to be solved, I said quietly. It's part of loving them. Easy for you to say. You weren't the one dealing with his tears every time you hung up the phone. You weren't the one explaining why Mama couldn't come to the school play or the soccer game or the parent-teacher conference. Her words hit their target. I had missed those things, and Daniel had cried about my absence, and Sophia had been the one managing his disappointment while I was thousands of miles away living my own life. That's what deployment means, I said. Sacrifice. Missing important moments so that other families don't have to make the same sacrifices. That's a lovely sentiment, Elena, but Daniel doesn't understand geopolitics. He just understands that his mother isn't there. And your solution was to make sure his mother was never there again? My solution was to give him stability. By ripping him away from everything he knows and loves? By giving him a mother who would actually be present. The word mother made my vision go white around the edges. You are not his mother, Sophia. You will never be his mother. You were his caregiver, temporarily, because I trusted you. Trust. Sophia's laugh was bitter. You didn't trust me, Elena. You supervised me. You called constantly, set up cameras, left detailed instructions for every aspect of his care. You treated me like hired help. I treated you like someone who had a history of not following through on commitments. When have I ever not followed through? The question was so absurd I almost laughed. Your job at the bank. Your apartment lease with Jessica. Your commitment to help Mom with her medical appointments. The loan you took out for nursing school and never used. Should I continue? Those were different situations. They were all situations where you made commitments you didn't keep. Why would caring for Daniel be any different? Because Daniel was different. Because I loved him. And you thought love gave you the right to steal him? I thought love gave me the right to protect him from growing up feeling abandoned by his mother. The conversation was becoming circular, each of us defending positions that were fundamentally incompatible. Sophia genuinely seemed to believe she'd been acting in Daniel's best interests, while I knew she'd been acting in her own. Sophia, I'm going to say this once, and then I'm hanging up. You are not Daniel's mother. You are not his guardian. You are not his primary parent or his protector or his decision-maker. You were his temporary caregiver, and you violated that trust in the worst possible way. Elena, I'm not finished. If you contact Daniel directly, I will have you arrested for violating your bail conditions. If you contact me again without going through our lawyers, I will file a restraining order. If you ever try to take my son away from me again, I will make sure you never have the opportunity to hurt him again. You can't keep me away from him forever. I'm his family. Watch me. I hung up and immediately called my lawyer to report the contact. Sophia's phone call would be documented as part of the ongoing criminal case, but more importantly, it had clarified something I'd been struggling with since her arrest. I had been hoping, somewhere in the back of my mind, that Sophia would eventually acknowledge the enormity of what she'd done and work toward earning back some measure of trust. But her complete inability to take responsibility for her actions, her continued belief that she'd been acting in Daniel's best interests, and her casual assumption that family relationships could survive attempted kidnapping told me everything I needed to know about the future. That evening, I sat Daniel down for a conversation I'd been dreading but knew was necessary. Daniel, do you remember when I explained that Aunt Sophia had to go away because she made some bad choices? He nodded, not looking up from the puzzle we were working on together. Well, those choices mean that Aunt Sophia won't be able to visit us for a very long time. Maybe not ever. His hands stilled on the puzzle pieces. Not ever. I don't know for sure. But I want you to understand that this isn't your fault, and it's not because you did anything wrong. Is it because I called for you instead of her when the police came? The question broke my heart. He'd been carrying guilt about his instinctive cry for me, thinking it had somehow contributed to Sophia's downfall. Oh, sweetheart, no. Nothing you did or said caused any of this. Aunt Sophia made her own choices, and they were wrong choices that hurt people. Did they hurt you? I considered lying, telling him that grown-ups don't get hurt by other grown-ups' actions. But he was old enough for some version of the truth. Yes, they hurt me. It hurt me to find out that someone I trusted was planning to take you away from me. I wouldn't have wanted to go away from you. I know that now. But when someone takes a child away without permission, the child doesn't get to choose. He was quiet for a long time, fitting puzzle pieces together with the focused concentration he brought to difficult problems. Will other people try to take me away from you? The fear in his voice was real and immediate. Dr. Reyes had warned me that children who experience attempted abduction, even by family members, often develop anxiety about their security and their parents' ability to protect them. No, Daniel. What happened with Aunt Sophia was very unusual. Most people would never try to take a child away from their family. But Aunt Sophia was family. Yes, she was. And that made what she did extra wrong. How do you know other family won't try to take me? Because other family members didn't spend months planning to take you away from me. Aunt Sophia's actions were her choice, not something that other people in our family would do. But even as I said it, I realized the deeper truth. I couldn't make that promise with absolute certainty. I couldn't guarantee that no one would ever try to hurt him again. What I could do was teach him to recognize inappropriate behavior, trust his instincts, and know that I would always fight to protect him. That night, as I was reading his bedtime story, Daniel interrupted me with a question that showed how much he'd been thinking about our conversation. Mama, when you go on deployments again, who will take care of me? The question I'd been dreading because I didn't have an answer yet. My trust in family members had been shattered. My faith in my ability to judge people's character had been shaken. The childcare solution that had seemed so natural and convenient had revealed itself as naive and dangerous. I don't know yet, buddy. But whoever it is, there'll be someone who understands that their job is to take care of you until I come home, not to replace me. How will you know for sure? I'll be much more careful about who I choose. And I'll make sure they understand that you belong with me always. Even when you're far away? Especially when I'm far away. As I turned off his light and kissed him goodnight, I realized that Sophia's betrayal had taught me something valuable about the nature of love and protection. Distance didn't weaken the bonds between parent and child, but those bonds could be threatened by people who confused care with ownership, who mistook presence for primacy, who believed that love gave them the right to make decisions that weren't theirs to make. The criminal case against Sophia would take months to resolve, but my understanding of what she'd tried to steal was already complete. She hadn't just wanted to take Daniel away from me geographically, she'd wanted to take him away from me emotionally, to become his mother in every way that mattered. She'd failed, but the attempt had cost us both something irreplaceable: the innocent trust that allows families to help each other without question, the assumption that love and good intentions are enough to ensure good outcomes, the belief that biological relationships automatically come with built-in safeguards against the worst forms of betrayal. From now on, I would protect Daniel not just from strangers who might wish him harm, but from the more insidious threat of people who might love him enough to steal him, who might confuse their own needs with his welfare, who might believe that their version of his best life was more important than his right to remain with his mother. The lesson was painful but necessary. Sometimes the people who pose the greatest threat to our children are the ones who claim to love them most. 6 months later, Sophia pled guilty to attempted custodial interference and received 2 years of probation, community service, and a restraining order that prohibited her from contacting Daniel or me without court approval. Her lawyer had pushed for a plea that would characterize her actions as a mental health crisis, but the evidence of premeditation was too strong to support that narrative. Daniel and I had settled into new routines that acknowledged the reality of my military commitments while prioritizing his security and our relationship. Instead of deploying for full 6-month rotations, I'd negotiated shorter assignments that allowed me to return home more frequently. It wasn't ideal for my career progression, but it was necessary for both our peace of mind. For childcare, I'd hired Mrs. Patricia Santos, a retired elementary school teacher whose references included 3 military families and whose background check revealed 30 years of working with children without a single incident. She lived in her own home, came to ours during my absences, and understood that her role was temporary guardian, not replacement mother. The difference in approach was striking. Where Sophia had gradually taken over more aspects of Daniel's care and decision-making, Mrs. Santos maintained clear boundaries. She sent me daily updates not because I demanded them, but because she understood that staying connected to Daniel's daily life was essential for both of us. She included me in decisions about activities and schedules instead of making those choices independently. Most importantly, she talked about me to Daniel in ways that reinforced our relationship rather than undermining it. When Daniel missed me during my 3-week assignment in Germany, Mrs. Santos helped him write letters and draw pictures to send me, rather than suggesting he focus on the people who were present instead. "Your mama loves you so much," she told him when he was sad about missing our bedtime phone call due to time zone confusion. "She's working hard to keep people safe, and that's something to be proud of." The contrast with Sophia's approach was clear in Daniel's behavior. Instead of becoming increasingly attached to his caregiver at my expense, he maintained his excitement about my calls and my returns. Instead of adapting so completely to my absence that my presence became disruptive, he continued to see me as his primary parent even during separations. But the changes in Daniel went deeper than his relationship with caregivers. The experience with Sophia had made him more aware of adult motivations and behaviors in ways that both impressed and saddened me. "Mrs. Santos always tells me when you're going to call," he observed during one of our conversations. "Aunt Sophia used to say she forgot, but she didn't really forget, did she?" "What makes you think that?" "Because she remembered everything else. She remembered my favorite breakfast and my friend's birthday party and what time soccer practice was. If she could remember all that, she could remember phone calls." At 7 years old, he was developing insights about deception and manipulation that most children don't need for years, if ever. It made him safer, but it also cost him some of the innocent trust that childhood should provide. Dr. Reyes assured me that Daniel's increased awareness wasn't necessarily harmful. "Children are naturally good at reading adult behavior," she explained. What Daniel experienced with your sister taught him to pay attention to inconsistencies between what adults say and what they do. That's actually a valuable life skill. But he shouldn't need to be suspicious of the adults who care for him. He's not suspicious of Mrs. Santos, is he? Or of you? She was right. Daniel trusted appropriately. He just trusted more wisely. He understood the difference between adults who were honest about their intentions and adults who said one thing while planning another. The criminal case had also taught me things about my sister that I'd been avoiding for years. The psychological evaluation ordered by the court revealed patterns of behavior I'd been excusing as immaturity or bad luck, difficulty maintaining stable employment, problems with boundaries in relationships, a tendency to see herself as the victim in situations she'd created. Your sister exhibits characteristics consistent with narcissistic personality traits, the evaluator explained during a meeting with my lawyer. Specifically, difficulty distinguishing between her own needs and the needs of others, and a belief that her emotional experience should take precedence over other people's rights. It explained so much about our relationship over the years. Sophia hadn't just been irresponsible with money or housing or jobs. She'd been incapable of understanding that her problems didn't automatically become my obligations. When she volunteered to care for Daniel, she wasn't just offering help. She was creating an opportunity to meet her own need for purpose and importance. The concerning aspect, the evaluator continued, is that she genuinely believes her plan to relocate with your son was motivated by love and concern for his welfare. She's not lying when she says she thought she was acting in his best interests. She's unable to recognize that her perception of his best interests was distorted by her own emotional needs. This meant that conventional consequences, criminal charges, restraining orders, social disapproval might not be sufficient to prevent future problematic behavior. Sophia wasn't going to learn from this experience in the way that someone with intact empathy and judgment might learn from consequences. Will she try something like this again? I asked. Not necessarily the same thing. But without intensive therapy and genuine insight into her thought patterns, she's likely to continue making decisions that prioritize her emotional needs over other people's rights and safety. The evaluation recommended that any future contact between Sophia and Daniel be supervised and limited, not just until she completed probation, but indefinitely. It was a relief to have professional validation for the boundaries I'd instinctively wanted to maintain. 1 year after Sophia's arrest, she sent a letter through her lawyer requesting supervised visitation with Daniel. The letter was full of apologies and promises to do better, explanations about therapy she'd been attending, and insights she'd gained about her behavior. I read it carefully, looking for signs of genuine understanding about the impact of her actions. Instead, I found more of the same self-focused reasoning that had led to her betrayal in the first place. I realize now that my plan to relocate with Daniel was impulsive and poorly thought out, she wrote. I was overwhelmed by the responsibility of caring for him and reacted emotionally instead of rationally. I've learned better coping strategies and would like the opportunity to rebuild our relationship. What struck me most was what she didn't say. No acknowledgement that she'd planned to steal my son. No recognition that her actions had terrorized a 6-year-old child. No understanding that the problem wasn't poor planning or emotional overwhelm, but a fundamental violation of trust and boundaries. I showed the letter to Dr. Reyes, who pointed out the same patterns I'd noticed. She's still characterizing her actions as mistakes rather than betrayals, Dr. Reyes observed. She's focused on her own emotional experience rather than the impact on you and Daniel. So no supervised visits? That's your decision as Daniel's mother. But I would want to see evidence of much deeper insight and accountability before I'd recommend exposing Daniel to her again. I discussed the letter with Daniel, who is now old enough to have opinions about contact with Sophia. Do you miss Aunt Sophia? I asked. He thought about it seriously, the way he approached all important questions. I miss some things about her, like the pancakes and the bedtime stories. But I don't miss being confused. Confused about what? About whether she was telling the truth. About whether you were really coming back. About whether I was supposed to love her more than you. His words confirmed what I'd suspected. Sophia's manipulation had been more extensive than I'd realized. She hadn't just been planning to take Daniel away from me, she'd been working to replace me in his affections while I was gone. You never have to choose between loving different people, I told him. Love isn't a competition. Aunt Sophia made it feel like one. That evening, I drafted my response to Sophia's request for visitation. It was brief and clear. Daniel has made significant progress in processing the trauma of your attempted abduction. Reintroducing contact with you at this time would not be in his best interests. This decision will be reevaluated annually based on Daniel's needs and your ability to demonstrate genuine accountability for your actions. 3 months later, I received another letter from Sophia, this one not sent through her lawyer. She had obtained my address somehow, violating the restraining order in the process. The tone was very different from her previous communication. Elena, you're being cruel and vindictive by keeping Daniel away from me. I made one mistake, and you're punishing me forever. Daniel needs to know his family, and you're depriving him of love and relationships out of spite. The letter went on to accuse me of using Daniel as a weapon against her, of being controlling and manipulative, of prioritizing my hurt feelings over Daniel's need for extended family connections. I forwarded the letter to my lawyer and to Daniel's therapist. The violation of the restraining order resulted in additional legal consequences for Sophia, but more importantly, it confirmed that she still didn't understand the gravity of what she'd done. This letter shows no insight into her behavior, Dr. Reyes pointed out. She's still focused on what she perceives as your overreaction rather than her own actions. Will she ever understand? Some people develop insight over time, especially with sustained therapy. But others remain convinced that their perspective is correct and everyone else is unreasonable. I realized then that I'd been hoping for something that might never come, genuine remorse from Sophia, real understanding of the harm she'd caused, authentic accountability that would make some kind of reconciliation possible. Instead, I needed to accept that Sophia might always see herself as the victim of my overprotectiveness rather than the perpetrator of attempted kidnapping. She might always believe that her love for Daniel justified her plan to steal him. She might never acknowledge that my role as his mother came with rights and responsibilities that superseded her desires to be his primary caregiver. That acceptance was liberating in unexpected ways. I stopped waiting for Sophia to change, stopped hoping she would apologize meaningfully, stopped feeling guilty about the boundaries I'd established. Instead, I focused entirely on what Daniel needed: stability, security, and the knowledge that his mother would always fight to protect him. 2 years after Sophia's arrest, Daniel asked me a question that showed how much he'd grown and processed during our time in therapy. Mama, do you think Aunt Sophia really thought she was helping me? I think she convinced herself she was helping you because it made her feel better about what she wanted to do. What's the difference? Really helping someone means doing what's best for them, even when it's hard for you. Pretending to help someone means doing what you want to do and telling yourself it's for their benefit. He nodded thoughtfully. Like when I want to stay up late and you say no because sleep is important, even though I get mad? Exactly like that. So Aunt Sophia was pretending to help me? I think so, yes. But she didn't mean to hurt me? This was the hardest part to explain, how someone could cause tremendous harm while genuinely believing they were acting out of love. I don't think she wanted to hurt you, Daniel. But wanting to do something and knowing how to do it safely are different things. Sometimes people hurt us even when they don't mean to, especially when they don't ask what we want. That's exactly right. At 9 years old, my son understood something it had taken me 32 years to learn. Love without respect for autonomy isn't really love at all. It's possession disguised as affection, control masquerading as care. Sophia had loved Daniel, but she loved him as an extension of herself rather than as a separate person with his own right to choose his home, his primary parent, his life. She'd confused her need to be needed with Daniel's need to be protected. The difference was everything. 5 years have passed since that night I watched Sophia pack Daniel's belongings through the nanny cam. Daniel is 11 now, thriving in school, confident in ways that children can only be when they trust that the adults in their lives will keep them safe. We've built a life that accommodates my military career without sacrificing our connection. I've specialized in shorter-term assignments that keep me closer to home base, accepted that my career progression might be slower, but my relationship with my son will be stronger. Mrs. Santos remains Daniel's caregiver during my absences, but those absences are measured in weeks now, not months. Daniel has learned to navigate the reality of having a mother who serves her country, but he's also learned the difference between temporary separation and permanent abandonment. He understands that deployment is part of my job, not a reflection of my priorities. He knows the difference between absence and abandonment because he lived through someone trying to make him believe they were the same thing. Sophia completed her probation without further incident, but she never developed the insight her therapist had hoped for. The psychological evaluation recommended ongoing therapy to address her boundary issues and tendency toward manipulative behavior, but compliance was voluntary after her probation ended. According to public records, she moved to Arizona 2 years ago, working in office administration and maintaining a low profile. She sends Daniel birthday cards each year, simple generic greetings with her name signed at the bottom. No personal messages, no requests for contact, no attempts to circumvent the boundaries we've established. I don't know if this restraint represents growth on her part or simply recognition that further violations would result in serious legal consequences. Daniel reads the cards with polite detachment, the way he might read mail addressed to someone else. He doesn't ask about Sophia anymore, doesn't express curiosity about her current life or desire for renewed contact. She's become part of his past rather than part of his present, significant because of what she taught him about trust and boundaries, but not significant enough to affect his daily happiness or security. Last month, Daniel had to write an essay for school about someone who had influenced his life. I expected him to write about a teacher or coach, maybe his grandfather who'd passed away the year before. Instead, he wrote about Sophia. My aunt taught me that love and trust are different things, his essay began. You can love someone and still know that they might make bad choices that could hurt you. She taught me that my feelings matter, even when adults think they know what's better for me. She taught me that my mom will always fight to protect me, no matter how far away she has to come or how hard it is. Reading his essay, I realized that Sophia's betrayal had given Daniel something valuable, a deep understanding of his own worth, his right to have his needs and preferences respected, his ability to recognize when adult behavior doesn't match adult words. He'd also gained something that many military children struggle with, absolute confidence in my commitment to him. He'd seen me drop everything and fly halfway around the world when he was in danger. He'd watched me establish boundaries to protect him even when those boundaries were difficult or painful to maintain. He knew, in a way that couldn't be shaken by future deployments or assignments, that he was my first priority. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Aunt Sophia had succeeded? He asked me recently while we were working on a puzzle together. What do you think would have happened? I think I would have been sad and confused. And I think you would have found me anyway. You're right on both counts. Would you have been angry at me for going with her? Oh, sweetheart, no. None of what happened was your fault. You were 6 years old. When adults make bad choices that affect children, it's never the child's responsibility. But what if I had wanted to go with her? What if I had been excited about the adventure? It was a sophisticated question that showed how much he'd thought about the complexity of the situation. Then I would have been sad that you wanted to go, but I still would have brought you home. Because 6-year-olds aren't old enough to make decisions about where they live or who takes care of them. That's why they have parents. When will I be old enough to make those kinds of decisions? Gradually. As you get older, you'll have more input into decisions that affect you. But some decisions will always be mine to make as long as you're my child. Even when I'm grown up? When you're grown up, you'll make your own decisions. But you'll always be my child, even when you don't need me to protect you anymore. He nodded, satisfied with this explanation in the way that children are when they understand their place in the world and trust that the adults around them will honor their responsibilities. That night, as I was tucking him into bed, a ritual we've maintained through deployments and caregivers and family crises, Daniel asked me one more question. Mom, do you think Aunt Sophia learned anything from what happened? I considered lying, telling him that adults always learn from their mistakes and grow into better people. But Daniel had earned the right to honest answers about complex situations. I hope she did. But even if she didn't, we learned important things. We learned how to recognize when someone's actions don't match their words. We learned that love means respecting other people's rights, not just trying to make them happy. We learned that family relationships have to be built on trust, not just blood. And we learned that you'll always come home for me. That's the most important lesson of all. As I turned off his light, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this point. Sophia's betrayal had been devastating, but it had also clarified something essential about my role as Daniel's mother. I wasn't just responsible for providing him with food, shelter, education, and affection. I was responsible for protecting his right to choose his own relationships, his own path, his own definition of home. That protection sometimes meant saying no to people who claimed to love him, sometimes meant maintaining boundaries that others saw as excessive, sometimes meant being willing to be viewed as the bad guy in order to preserve his autonomy and security. Sophia had wanted to take my son away from me, but what she'd actually done was teach me never to hand over the role of mother to anyone, for any reason, under any circumstances. That role wasn't just about daily care or emotional connection or even physical presence. It was about being willing to fight for my child's right to remain my child, no matter who else might want to claim that privilege, no matter how much easier it might be to share that responsibility, no matter how far I had to travel or how many relationships I had to sacrifice to keep him safe. In the end, my sister had taught me the most valuable lesson of my life, that motherhood isn't just about love, it's about fierce, unwavering protection of the person you love most. It's about recognizing that some bonds are too sacred to compromise, some roles too important to delegate, some responsibilities too precious to share. Daniel is mine to protect, mine to guide, mine to love, not because I own him, but because I understand that my primary job is to ensure he grows up knowing he has a mother who will never, ever let anyone take him away from the life and love he deserves. That knowledge has made him confident, secure, and capable of trusting appropriately while maintaining healthy boundaries. It's made me a better mother, a more decisive leader, and a person who understands the difference between love and possession. Sophia may never understand what she tried to take from us, but we understand what we fought to keep, not just our relationship with each other, but Daniel's right to grow up in the home chosen by his mother. Surrounded by people who love him enough to respect his autonomy, protected by someone who sees guarding his childhood as the most important mission she'll ever accept. If this resonated, tap like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs stronger boundaries today. I post real stories about protecting your peace and your family. Quick questions for you. Would you trust a sibling with full-time childcare again after this? What safeguards would you put in place? Nanny cams, written agreements, daily check-ins. Where's the line between helping and overstepping with someone else's child? If you're military or travel for work, what's your emergency plan for custody issues? Do you believe family should get a second chance here? Why or why not? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone.